Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Haley. I'm a digital nomad and I'm currently living and working from Mexico City. If you're a remote worker and you're curious about the digital nomad lifestyle here, then this video will help you decide if Mexico City is your next remote work destination. Let's get into it. Mexico City is a modern city with all of the opportunities and amenities of New York or LA, but at relatively lower costs. There's a subway system, museums, and historic attractions. It's a thriving scene of professionals, artists, and entrepreneurs. The housing rentals are high quality and have great Wi-Fi. You can find coffee shops and co-working spaces in almost every neighborhood. And my favorite part, Mexico City has an incredible foodie scene. Also, the city itself is huge. There are 21 million people in the greater metro area, so there are so many neighborhoods to explore. Let's talk about the most popular neighborhoods for remote workers, which all make for a great place to start out in. As you get more acclimated to the city, your housing options will broaden, but for your first time in CDMX, these are all great, safe choices. In all of the following neighborhoods, you will find coffee shops and co-working spaces, quality apartments, restaurants, nightlife options, and many taquerias, and remote workers and expats from all over the world. Roma is split into two areas, Roma Norte and Roma Sur. This neighborhood is a really cool neighborhood. This area was built in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The architecture is so beautiful. The style is old European, neo-colonial. I'd say Roma is probably the most popular neighborhood for remote workers, first-time CDMX visitors, and even solo travelers. The rent prices in Roma Sur are just a tad bit lower than Roma Norte. The average monthly rental for a one-bedroom in Roma can be anywhere starting around $800 to $1,000 a month. A flat in Roma Norte is going to be more expensive than that because it borders more high-end neighborhoods. It's also a little quieter in Roma Norte, though overall Mexico City is pretty loud and noisy in most areas, so that's kind of hard to escape. La Condesa is right next to Roma. This is where I stayed during my time in Mexico City, and it's also a great place to live. It's similar to Roma. It has two parks, Parque España and Parque Mexico. Lots of great restaurants and cafes. It's very fashionable with unique clothing boutiques and vintage shops. There are also a few theaters in La Condesa, including a Shakespeare theater. La Condesa is not necessarily a budget-friendly neighborhood. You might be lucky to find a place that's around $1,000, maybe less than $1,000, depending on the season that you go to Mexico City or just how long you'll be there or the availability, all these factors. My boyfriend and I shared a small but not too cramped one bedroom. It was actually kind of difficult to work there, so I actually went and worked at cafes most of the time. Our one bedroom cost us $2,600 actually in totals with all of the Airbnb fees. I think it was around $2,700 for 1 month, so splitting it cost us $1,350, somewhere around there for a one bedroom for the month. There is an occupancy task when you book on Airbnb, and I think it's for only Airbnb listings. So it's about 3 to 5% of your entire rental period. I'll talk more on accommodations later. Although Roma and La Condesa are really cool neighborhoods, the rental prices are still much more expensive. There are other neighborhoods that are worth mentioning that are right next to La Condesa and Roma. Escandon and Narvarte both feel like a traditional Mexico City barrio. So here you'll find family-run businesses, taquerias, cantinas, and monthly averages for a 1 to 2 bedroom here can be around $600 to $800 a month. For those whose budget can afford it, Polanco is a more upscale neighborhood with fancy apartment complexes, high-end retailers, Michelin star restaurants, and some of the most incredible museums in Mexico City. The average monthly rental here in Polanco starts around $1,200 and goes up from there. So there are a few ways to find an apartment in Mexico City. The first and easiest is finding an Airbnb, especially if you don't know how long you'll be there or if you're a solo traveler. There are also a bunch of low-cost boutique hotels if you feel like you want to take a few days to check out some neighborhoods. I'd also recommend looking at hostelworld.com. It's not just hostels, you can also find bed and breakfasts, apartments, and hotels for lower costs. And for other options, you can check out these Facebook groups: Mexico City Housing, Rooms, Apartments, sublets. There are some expat Facebook groups like Foreigners and Expats in Mexico City and Expat Women in Mexico City. Also check out this website, www.inmuebles24.com. I know some travelers who have found some pretty nice apartments through this website. Generally, the best way to find the cheapest accommodations is if you have time to land in the city and start from all of these Facebook groups and Inmuebles24, then you can kind of go and check out apartments and see what fits your style and your budget. If you have the time to do that, that's going to be the cheapest way to find your accommodations. There are coffee shops and co-working spaces in every single neighborhood in Mexico City. When I wanted to switch up my working space, which most of the time I did work from cafes, I found quite a few cafes in La Condesa that I'd love to share with you. If you find yourself staying near or around La Condesa, you can check these out. Blend Station, Thomas Té, Monsieur Croque, El Pendulo Cafe, which is also a bookstore. If you like co-working spaces, there are over 100 in Mexico City that you can check out. You can use this website, coworker.com, and do a search for co-working spaces in Mexico City. If you're interested in co-living options, these are kind of like hotel-style complexes for digital nomads and remote workers of all ages and of all types. The biggest organization is Selena. Actually, by the end of this year, they will have over 400 locations all over the world. Try and check that out if you want to be surrounded in a community of remote workers. Delicious quality Mexican food is so affordable that you could get by with $200 to $300 for the month if you're doing a combination of street tacos and shopping at local mercados for produce and veggies. I ate tacos like 2 to 3 times a week while I was there, and I would spend around $6 for a plate of tacos, but I also took huge advantage of the incredible foodie scene. So I went to a variety of restaurants, from small local eateries to taquerias to upscale restaurants to Michelin star restaurants. I went to my first Michelin star restaurant while I was in Mexico City, so if you do have the budget, I highly recommend to try and get into the foodie scene and try as many restaurants as you can. For whichever neighborhood you decide to live in, for all your basic needs, whether you need to go to a market, grocery store, a bookstore, a coffee shop, a printing shop, which I had to go to quite a few times, places to go shopping for clothes, everything that you need, all of that is within walking distance. Mexico City is a walkable city and everything is convenient. When you need public transport, you can take the Mexico City Metro, which costs 5 pesos, which is about 25 cents per ride, no matter where you're going. There are bike and scooter shares. The EcoBC bicycle sharing program costs 500 pesos a year, which is 25 US dollars. The most convenient way to get around is using Uber, which is much cheaper to use here than it is in the US. For example, a 20-minute ride will cost around $4 or $5. In terms of things to do in Mexico City, honestly, the possibilities are endless. As one of the oldest megacities in the Americas, there is a deep and rich history from the Aztec period to the Spanish conquest to the Revolution to now, and it shows through the art, architecture, and all of the cultural offerings of this city. It's actually hard to sort it all out, but here is kind of a quick rundown. There are numerous parks, art galleries, museums, architectural landmarks, obviously the food scene, and even more options for day trips and weekend trips to the rest of the country. There is no way that you will cover all of the must-sees even if you're there for a month. I'd recommend checking out one neighborhood a day, and that kind of keeps your list of things to do manageable. So now that we've talked about all of the greatest parts about living and working remotely from Mexico City, I want to share with you the challenges I felt while I was there. Originally, I planned on staying in Mexico City for 2 months, so I wanted to share some of my reasons as to why I left and only stayed there for 1 month. In Mexico, you have to pay close attention to some places where you get your food and drink. One area in particular is any fruits and veggies that you might get from the markets. You have to wash them thoroughly, and washing them with filtered water might not be enough. It would be better if you soaked them in a cleaning solution like water with vinegar for 15 to 20 minutes. In the first 3 days of my arriving in Mexico City, I got some leafy lettuces from the market. I washed it with filtered water. You cannot wash with tap water. You can't wash any produce, veggies, anything. You can't drink the tap water. It all has to be filtered water. I didn't wash the leafy green lettuces well enough, and I got extremely sick for the following 3 days. I was up all night with the most painful stomach stomach cramps I've ever experienced. I was vomiting. It was the worst experience of any food poisoning or bacterial poisoning that I've experienced on my travels. Like, the thing is, I've eaten street food from all over the world. I really rarely have stomach issues, and this one was just particularly nasty. So be very careful and make sure your food is properly cleaned, and along with that, make sure your food is hot and thoroughly cooked, and do not eat foods that have been sitting out in the open. If you're going to Mexico, I think you should do a little bit of research about how to avoid getting sick in Mexico. The air quality can feel dizzying because some days the smog is so thick that you can barely see the surrounding buildings at times. So most of the time I kept the windows closed in my Airbnb. Also, the water is not safe to drink from the tap, so you have to only drink filtered water or bottled water or buy those huge jugs of purified water. Mexico City is 7,000 feet high and the altitude sickness is real. A typical day can really take it out of you, and if you like to exercise outside, you really have to rethink your expectations there. Because of all this, the air is also really dry, so you have to make sure that you're drinking more water every single day to stay hydrated. You might experience shortness of breath in your first week, and you might even have sleeping problems. Because I was so sick the first week, combined with the air pollution, the dryness, the altitude, this is all what did me in. I felt nauseated often, and because of how dry it was, I developed skin rashes all over my body. I mean, I had days where like my face was peeling skin. Every time I went outside, my eyes were very itchy and kind of red. I just had really bad allergies when I was there. The unusual thing is though, I've stayed in elevation, at this elevation and higher, for longer periods of time in the past, and I've just never experienced this amount of nausea before on the daily. This really affected my work productivity and my mental energy, so after 10 days of being in Mexico City, I decided that I just needed to finish the month out and leave Mexico City. Lastly, there are scams that you need to look out for. I've heard of fake police scams where someone approaches you claiming that they're a police officer and they tell you that you've broken the law in some way, and you know that this is a scam if you haven't done anything wrong. Also, make sure that when you get in a taxi, you negotiate the fare before you start the ride. There is no meters in the taxis. Actually, I think mostly throughout Mexico, you won't find meters, or you can just use Uber. There is a language barrier in Mexico City. If you go to Mexico City and you don't know any Spanish, it might be a little bit unpleasant for you. If you could learn a little bit of Spanish before you go there, just very basics, it would help you speaking with the cashier at the grocery store or even ordering food. Mexicans are really patient. They're just very friendly people, so they will only appreciate you trying to speak Spanish, and they will do their best to really communicate with you and try to understand. I was really surprised that there was a language barrier. I have taken Spanish lessons throughout my schooling, and it was enough for me to get around in Mexico City, but I think that it would be a good idea to even just like have some sort of translator app on your phone. No city is perfect for everyone. Those were the drawbacks that I experienced in Mexico City, but having said that, it's an awesome city for remote working and digital nomads and expats and even first-time visitors and solo travelers. You have access to everything you need. Food seen as first class, the amount of things to do are inexhaustible, and it's a lower cost of living relative to the US. I know that was a lot of information, but I hope this video has helped you decide whether or not Mexico City is going to be your next remote work destination. If you have any questions about any topics I didn't cover in this video, go ahead and drop your questions down below and I can answer them to the best of my knowledge. You can also send me a message on Instagram as well. Thank you for watching. Thanks for being here. Until next time.